Brilliant. Well, kia ora everyone. I won't be doing a prayer today or a karakia. I don't have one in front of me, but we will either be doing one or the other in future. Another conversation that I need to be having with councillors, so apologies for that. Let's get into it. So the first is the inaugural council meeting, which I hereby declare is now open. I don't believe we have any apologies. Could be corrected. No apologies. Perfect. Right, first agenda item. Second agenda item, should I say. So pursuant to a conversation with the councillors and a decision made, I have decided that we will table this issue until the next council meeting, which will be in December. So there will be no discussion. The only bit I might point out is that I will be exercising my right under the Local Government Act to appoint Councillor Stuart McDonnell as my Deputy Mayor. Other than that, the rest of the report will be tabled for the next council meeting.
Your Worship, pursuant to the requirements of the statutory requirements for the inaugural meeting, I would move that for the purposes that pending production of a further report from the Chief Executive, there shall be no committees established. In the interim, all matters shall be considered by the full council.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hovell. Yes, totally agreed. So there'll be no committees formed until the next meeting, and all matters will come to full council in the interim. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Dixon, would you like to speak to that? And I believe that motion has passed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. And the motion has passed. Sorry guys, just getting used to this. Meeting schedule, so if I could get a mover for this motion.
One's a bit slow. I'll move that the recommendation be accepted.
And a seconder, cool. So motion mover, Councillor Hovell, and seconder, Councillor McDonnell. And all those in favour, please say aye. And the motion has been carried. Standing orders. I believe that there may be some discussion on this one, so if we have a mover of the motion. Councillor Stuart McDonnell, did you want to speak on standing orders at all? No. And a seconder? Councillor John Gardine. Do we have any discussion, any further points?
Your Worship, there's two matters I wish to raise really for clarification, and the first is in relation to section 13.1, and that deals with members' rights to attend meetings, and it's something I think the Chief Executive can help with. Any member of the council is able to attend any meeting of the local authority, and I'm just seeking some clarification as to members of the full council, whether they are able to attend meetings of the Mataura Community Board and be present during public excluded portions without having any special resolution required by the Community Board. So that's at paragraph 13.1.
If the Chief Executive could speak to that when he's ready.
Through your Worship, I believe the answer is yes. but I would like to just double check on the definition of a local authority member, and my off-the-top interpretation would that it would include an elected, so if you're attending a meeting of the community board as a local authority member who has, as of right, is allowed to remain in committee unless lawfully excluded, my off-the-cuff assessment is that elected councillors who have occasion to attend a community board meeting, and if that meeting is conducting in-committee business, subject to reading an interpretation that goes against that, my belief is that the elected member is entitled to remain and does not need to seek express permission from the chair, although it may well be courtesy to do so. But I would qualify that with that answer with that, without the extra 10 minutes just to quickly look up some definitions to make sure that I'm absolutely correct.
Thank you. The other matter relates to section 20.7 dealing with conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest apply directly or indirectly, so it could be a spouse or a partner where there's financial gain either directly or indirectly. And what Standing Orders 20.7 says is that members with a financial interest should physically withdraw themselves from the table where we've got a public meeting, and if it's public excluded, then they should leave the room. So if we're in a public meeting, Standing Orders merely say that you should leave the table, but you can stay in the room. And it's a matter in the next paragraph for each individual to decide, rather than we can't have a motion at the table that declares someone to have that. So to me, that suggests that the role of the Chief Executive is to highlight any particular issue, but it is for the individual member to decide whether they have that conflict.
Oh, if you could respond to that one as well.
Yes, good point, through your worship. Absolutely correct, Councillor Hovell. It is not for any elected member to say you have a conflict of interest and you should remove yourself. They can advise the member they believe they may have a conflict of interest. They can seek advice from the Chief Executive, but ultimately the judgment is on the member, him or herself. In relation to standing orders, that's correct. I will note, however, that the Auditor General's Office believes it's best practice when it comes to a financial pecuniary interest, that the member should actually leave the room. And I guess the reason for that is to avoid any possibility or suggestion that body language is being used to influence an outcome.
Is there any further matters on the standing orders? There's actually some that I would like to point out through the Chief Executive. So in Appendix 8, there's a number of points in here that are missing the standing orders references. I know it's just a formality, but for instance, on the second page here, action on previous resolutions, it looks like there's a half-finished standing order reference. And just all of the other ones that are blank here, do they have standing orders associated with them, or that are missing, or are they more summarisations of those individual points?
I would need to take some advice on that, Your Worship, because this has been produced by Local Government New Zealand as a standard template, and I'm not sure why some of those paragraphs haven't been referenced by the actual clause within the standing order itself. So I would need to take some advice on that, and my suggestion would be that if the councillors have a mind to move these standing orders, that they be done so subject to any minor editorial amendment deemed necessary to give greater understanding to how the appendices in particular relate to the body of the document.
Yes, I would tend to agree, and I think that's in line with Councillor Hoval's points there. Was there any other discussion points from councillors out there? No? The other thing I just wanted to know, there was a removal of Appendix 9, the Mayor's powers to adopt under the Act, Section 41A, and remove the appendix around workshops. I was just wondering if there was a reasoning behind those, or is that directly due to, this is in comparison to last year's standing orders, so last Traineum standing orders. I was just trying to understand the removal of those appendices.
That's appendix?
Appendix, I believe it was 9 and 11 in the old standing orders, which you should have a booklet there.
Mm-hmm.
That may have been a templating difference as well.
Yes, again, Your Worship, this is an LGNZ template that has been amended to reflect current practice and any minor changes in the way in which councils govern themselves. I couldn't give you an authoritative answer off the top of my head about why those appendix have been removed or whether they are incorporated elsewhere in the document as we speak, because certainly the Mayor's powers under Section 41A is referenced in the Local Government Act 2002, that's what it refers to. So whether that was deemed to be sufficiently standalone, because there's some parts of these standing orders relate directly to either the Local Government Act 2002 or the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987. So whether the author of the new standing orders thought that Section 41A, for example, which is in statute, doesn't need to be a separate appendix. Again, I'd need to talk to the authors to find that clarification.
I think to Councillor Hoval's point, and also just some errors in templating, moving it across, I think that we should amend the motion slightly so that we accept the standing orders on the basis of those minor editorial changes that obviously will be run past councillors as well, but we still adopt these standing orders. I'm happy to move that motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Shermatt-Denell, and then, so cool. And then, so that obviously, I believe the order takes us back to the motion itself. Do we have someone to move the motion? Is that amendment? Councillor Stringer, and someone to second that? Councillor John Gardine. And all those in favour, say aye. Aye. Fantastic. Standing orders have been adopted. Where are we at? Next up was the agenda item number 5, Gore District Council Code of Conduct. Just trying to find that, but do we have someone to move that motion? This is to accept the Code of Conduct as it stands. Moved by Councillor Hysed. And a seconder, Councillor Stringer. All those in favour, please say aye. Cool. Motion has been moved. And then changing over to the Chief Executive here for the general explanations as part of the inaugural council meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, under the clause 21 of Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act, I'm required to give you a general explanation of relevant statutes that affect local government. So for those in the audience that are wondering about the necessity of this, it is a statutory requirement, and so I'll do my best to efficiently run through the various statutes and to give you an appreciation. I should also mention, Your Worship, that we have a standing invitation from a local law firm to provide a more detailed briefing to councillors on all or some of these enactments, should the council wish to avail themselves of that opportunity. So the Local Government Act 2002 is the first statute, and of course this is a statute that I will and the council will be referring to on a very regular basis throughout the term of this particular council. It sets out really your powers, your obligations, your roles and responsibilities as an elected member, and it's a very important statute. It does run to a fearsome size, but the council staff are there to highlight the relevant provisions that you need to be taking cognizance of prior to making your decision on a given matter. But it does, for elected members, you should familiar yourselves with particularly decision-making provisions in the Act, the principles of consultation, your role as an elected member, the role of the Chief Executive, the role of the Mayor. They're all quite explicitly laid out in the Act, and so, for example, it's said here that the Chief Executive is the employer of staff, the Council employs the Chief Executive, and if everyone appreciates those respective roles, it generally makes for a well streamlined and good functioning council. The other act mentioned here is the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. It's a mouthful and colloquially is referred to as LGOIMA by those in the trade. It really governs, and so it has two discrete arms, I guess you would say, or parts. So the Act is very heavily anchored around the principle of freedom of information, and information, when requested, should be made available. And there are timelines for the production of that information when anyone from the public can request. There are legitimate reasons for declining to release that information, and those reasons are laid out on my page 12 of the report. So they cover such things as these absolute, no questioned reasons, which is the prejudicing the maintenance of the law, or when someone's safety is endangered. There are another host of reasons, and a lot of these are, some of them are contentious, some of them are clear-cut. So the protection of privacy of people is a pretty clear-cut example. The maintenance of professional legal privilege is also a fairly clear-cut example where it's permissible to withhold information. But there are others around carrying on negotiations, and this is an important point to emphasise, that sometimes it's quite permissible, and often is very permissible, to decline to release information when negotiations are in train. But once the negotiations are concluded, often the information then can be released, and invariably is, and that applies to, like, so for example, in committee minutes governing such things as tenders or other type of negotiations. Once completed, generally speaking, the information is released. So this is a very important part of the operation. The consideration of information requests is the responsibility of the Chief Executive, and if a member of the public is dissatisfied with the answer, is entitled to seek a review from the Office of the Ombudsman, who then the Ombudsman requests, and we must deliver all the information to the Ombudsman, who, following an investigation, will make a ruling as to whether the information can be continued to be withheld or whether there should be a full or partial release. So the role of the Ombudsman, off the top of my head, I think New Zealand was the 3rd country in the world to get the office of the Ombudsman. It goes back to 1975. It's a Scandinavian term. It was invented ironically by, I think, Sweden. And when we talk about the least corrupt countries in the world and with the most transparent processes, New Zealand and Denmark usually fight for #1 spot. And so the Ombudsman's role is one as a gatekeeper. It's a officer appointed by Parliament, and it's there to investigate administrative decisions of the council, and that's an important point to emphasise. The Ombudsman is there not to disturb decisions made by a democratically elected council, but it's decisions made by myself or officers of council where someone could say there's been some maladministration, and those decisions can be reviewed and a directive given by the Office of the Ombudsman. To be fair, most of the interface with this council has been with the Ombudsman would be over refusal of release of official information. There's only been probably 2, 3, 4 maybe in my time where there's been a decision made by the administration which has been the subject of a complaint and then for a review by the Ombudsman. The Lagoima also covers such things as access to meetings, audit papers, audit meetings, at meetings. A lot of the stuff that's in the standing orders is directly lifted from the Lagoima Act. An important part to emphasise is the councillors have qualified privilege, and it's not absolute privilege, so it should not in any form or imagination be misconstrued with the parliamentary privilege, which is absolute. So the qualified privilege just means that councillors who act with a firm belief and without malice are protected. But if it is malicious and reckless, the qualified privilege will not attach to the incident, and some liability could be faced by the individual concerned. But as I've said to previous councils, if elected members obey the normal rules of courtesy, good manners and mutual trust and respect, this type of issue need not bother you at all. We also have the Local Authority Members Interest Act, and this covers pecuniary interests. It's particularly important for elected members that may be contracting with the council. Now, again, the key thing that you'll find when you read some of the publications of the Office of the Auditor General is that there's nothing wrong in having a conflict of interest. It's how you manage that conflict, which is the most important thing. And so, in this case, there is a $25,000 threshold that's placed in the 1968 Act. Look, it's painfully out of date. The financial thresholds they reflect 1968 world, but despite repeated urgings from a number of commentators, Parliament over the years has not been inclined to update the Act. So the key thing with the contracting rule is that if you're contracting with the council, you cannot conduct more than $25,000 worth of business with the council in a given year, otherwise you'll be in breach of the Act. Extensions to that limit can be given by the Office of the Auditor General, but the onus, and a clear thing here, is the onus is on the elected member to actually monitor the expenditure levels of business transacted and to apply for an extension before the limit is reached. That's a very important point. And then, of course, the participation rule, which means that you can't vote on a matter in which you have a financial interest. And I think I'd hope that's fairly well understood by elected members. More contentious, I guess, or where the grey line is non-pecuniary conflicts of interest. And generally you find the smaller community, the more likely non-pecuniary conflicts of interest arise. This is where you don't have a financial interest, but you may belong to an organisation or a club or school board, whatever it might be, that has an issue before the council, and you have a divided loyalty, because your loyalty lies with the council and also the organisation that you may have an office, you may hold an office with, and the higher the office you hold in the other organisation, the more conflict you have, and again, generally speaking, you've got a conflict. You can't do justice to either. You should remove yourself from the debate. Cover exemption, I've covered that exemption. So the local government, there's been an amendment to the Local Government Act which covers the Local Government Pecuniary Interests Register. There's a separate report that appears in the next section of the meeting, but this is an important provision that came law just 2 days ago, and unlike in previous times where elected members in a local council setting had the discretion as to whether they would compile a register of their own personal interest, and all of that conflicts can be managed, this is now mandatory. And we've got till February to actually compose a register of all elected members' interests. It's quite expansive and far-reaching. Previously, the council had a voluntary process where, for example, just interests in the Gore district were mentioned or requested. This is now more expansive than that. So the register will be compiled, and obviously there's a provision in that Act to actually appoint a registrar, and that's the subject of a separate report in the agenda, but the key emphasis there is to ensure that you need to actually participate, and ultimately this will be on a website for the public to peruse. Some councils have done this for some time on a voluntary basis, but this is now compulsory. Now, I never like talking about some of these acts, but I have to. So we have the Serious Fraud Office Act, which covers serious fraud. Now, the council does have a fraud policy, and it is an area of some inquisition by our annual audit, and the council has never had any issues with this area, but the CFO, the Serious Fraud Office, certainly investigates more serious allegations of fraud, including bribery and corruption. We also have the Health and Safety Act, Health and Safety Act at Work Act, which is a mouthful. That was the act that was comprehensively overhauled. The previous act was 1992. It places a heavy burden on senior managers and the governance arm of an entity to look after the safety and the health and well-being of their workers. The council does have a duty in respect of elected members are officers under the Act, and therefore you have responsibilities under the Health and Safety at Work Act, along with myself and senior managers. But as elected members, you don't have the liability that the Chief Executive and the senior management staff do in regard to any breach. So it's a very important part of our work, and the health and safety practices of the council are monitored by our Audit and Risk Committee. Harmful Digital Communications Act 2015. It's probably a regretful inclusion in the statute book that reflects the modern digital communications and harm that can come from people that have a proclivity to send harmful messages on a consistent basis. And there are 10 communications principles for guiding communication online. I'm sure that elected members will conduct themselves in a very professional, courteous and respectful manner. But it's something we have to be aware of, because we do interface with the digital media, and therefore need to be wary of a person who could potentially be committing an offence under this Act. We also have the sections 99, 105 and 105A of the Crimes Act. They really relate to the notion that elected members should not gain reward from their office, and therefore should not be taking gifts, bribes, or obtain in a financial sense an advantage by dint of their office. In a similar vein, the Secret Commissions Act is the principle that a person holding a position of trust should not make a profit through their office. And again, it's an offence if someone corruptly accepts or obtains or solicits a gift or other consideration just for doing their job as an elected member, or indeed an officer. And the council incidentally does have a gifts policy which is quite highly regulates what can be accepted as a gift and what must be refused. And finally, Your Worship, the Financial Market Conduct Act, it doesn't really have any application to this council because we don't offer any public stock offerings. Happy to answer any questions, and I hope I haven't taken too much time.
So you're allowed to give me a bottle of whiskey if you want.
If you could hold that motion, Councillor Mackenzie. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, the Chief Executive. Do we have any comment or questions for the Chief Executive on that point? Councillor Stringer.
What is the limit for the Gifts Act? Is there a bottom cut-off, or is there any sort of value?
Through Your Worship, I think it might be $100, but I just might need to defer to the General Manager Corporate Support. 50, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Hysted.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to the CEO in relation to the interest register. I realise it's coming up later on the agenda, but some of us in an employment situation find ourselves appointed as directors, trustees that don't necessarily involve your own personal interest, but involve that of other people. What level of detail is on this published register, and is that information necessary to be disclosed?
Through Your Worship, I can't give you an absolute categoric answer at this point in time. We are working with the Invercargill City Council to establish a template that we can both use, but trusts are captured in this particular legislation, and I'd need to take some advice or have a deeper think about trusts where, by dint of, say, an elected member's employment, it would probably get down to how much influence the role of trustee you have, and if it's just for fulfilling a very, discrete set of duties, as opposed to a wide-ranging and quite a powerful role as an all-encompassing trustee. That might be different, but I'd need to check on that. But we'll be working with elected members over the next couple of months on that basis.
Just a supplementary to that, so a directorship would be taken as a direct influence?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Stringer.
Through your honour to the CE, could you please also look into holding companies? Are they required to be supplied as well? Thank you.
Any further discussion on this matter? Brilliant. So the recommendation is that that information be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Gardine, seconder, Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? The motion is carried. I believe that brings us to the end of the inaugural council meeting, and I hereby declare it closed. We will now take a 1 minute interim, so we have a break between the two meetings and shake up your legs a little bit, and then we will get into the first council meeting. Thank you. Fantastic. So we will draw attention back to the council, and I will hereby open the first council meeting. How exciting. So once again, carry over the apologies from the previous meeting, which are none. Declaration of conflict of interest as the first one in here. So I will be declaring a conflict of interest for section number 9, the meal expense claim, as it directly affects my financial expenses. Do we have any other conflicts around the table? declarations of conflicts around the table. Councillor Highstead?
Just a question on item 8, Mr Mayor. The report from the Chief Executive points to your potential conflict of interest in that item. Do you intend to stand down from the discussion on that item?
No, I don't declare to stand down as a conflict for the executive assistant to myself as the mayor. As that is an item, it's an appointment by the chief executive essentially. So who that staff member is, I don't get to decide. Were there any other conflicts declared?
I might also declare conflict of interest for that item.
Just a clarification, was that item number 9?
Affirmative.
Okay. Fantastic. Moving on to... Do we need to have a motion for those conflicts? Or will you speak?
Just note the last one.
This one? Okay, cool. Fantastic. Confirmation of minutes, as we can see and hear from the extraordinary meeting on the Thursday, 6th of October 2022. They have been signed off by the previous mayor and the chief executive to confirm their correctness. The recommendation, I'd imagine, is that they should be approved. Just find it.
Just for noting.
Yeah.
Just for noting it in the yes, we're in the minutes of the 9th of November. So these are for noting. They've already been approved. These are for approval. These are the ones that this council has actually.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So the first one there is just noting that they have been signed as correct. The second one, we will need a confirmation from, as it is new council, the declarations that was the swearing in ceremony. So if I could move the recommendation, Councillor McPhail there, Richard McPhail, and seconded by Councillor Phillips. All those in favour, please say aye. And the motion has been carried. Right, more into the fun stuff. So there is an update to the spring clean in progress of the Gore Aquatic Centre and conversations with the Chief Executive. This was a report put together just to show not only councillors but the public about what's been happening at the Aquatic Centre and a bit of progress. Did we have someone to move the motion of receiving this report? Councillor Reid, and a seconder, Councillor Dixon. And now the floor is open for discussion. Do we have any comments from councillors on this? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate the staff for all the hard work that they did, and obviously everybody in the community is looking forward to the opening of the pool. Also like to mention that the communications over the delay and all the extra work that went in were brilliant. Many people I've heard comment on that, so well done.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor McDonnell? Sorry.
There appears to have been a lot of extra work done. Do we have a costing on, do we have a budget overrun, or was it within budget?
The Chief Executive, did you want to appoint a General Manager who might be able to speak to that? Or yourself?
Thanks, Your Worship. I might get the General Manager, Community Lifestyle Services. I'm not familiar, although maybe the General Manager Corporate Support in terms of financials might be able to, but I'm not familiar or aware of any notable cost overrun.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. There were additional maintenance budgets that were used, but it was all within approved guidelines. So although a couple of additional items were undertaken, the manager of the Aquatic Centre was checked in on a regular basis to make sure the funding was available. So it's all within budget.
Can I just, through you, Worship, reinforce our Corporate Services General Manager's comments and assure Councillor McDonnell that our Facilities Manager actually played a very strong hand in managing the financial budgets as the maintenance program was undertaken, and I just want to reinforce Councillor Reid's point and put on record publicly the extra effort that the staff did to ensure that it remained within budget. So the staff spent numerous hours actually doing some not so nice work with regards to the regrouting and that was required at the pool. But they did that along with some of the contractors of our community who also volunteered to ensure that the maintenance program remained within budget and went that extra mile. So I think it's really important for us as a council, us as a community, to recognise the extra efforts that were undertaken, not just from our aquatic staff and facility staff, but also a number of our local contractors, and the ability for them to work in with each other was gratefully received from certainly our staff and us as a council. And I just would want to make sure that that's noted on public record.
Thank you for that input, Rex and Lorne, on those points. Good to hear that it stuck to the budget, and yes, that the staff put on some good work there. Is there any further comments on this report? Right, with that, do we have in support? Please say aye. And against? And the motion is carried. Next on the agenda is the naming of the library and the James Cumming Wing Community Centre. So if councillors could flip to that, including myself. In conversation with the Chief Executive, this is primarily a report that has come to council as we need a name for the library and community centre, rather than just the names that are going out there in the community. I have some comments, but I'll first move, see if there is a mover for this, that the report shall be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Reid, and seconder, Councillor Stringer. Open for discussion. So we had, first up, Robert Kenzie.
Just a point, was it put up for public consultation at all, the naming of it?
Chief Executive, if you could answer that point.
I stand to be corrected by Lorraine Webston-Webb, who is the library's manager and was involved with the consultation along with Sonia Gerken, our GM, Communications and Marketing. But my recollection is that the name was on the plan of a building. But is Sonia? Yep. That was when we went out to the public to talk about the concept of the library and community centre.
Yes, through your worship. When we put out the visuals and stuff, the name was Gore Library and James Cumming Community Centre. I think there's visuals also further on that have gone out to the public subsequently in discussions over the parking and landscaping, which had those names on the building as well.
It's just a point I was wondering if no, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hysted. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to Mr. Parry. Are we making a decision tonight on the naming, or is this just a report that we're receiving? Because previous councillors did express the view that we should have a public debate on the naming. I realise there's been a bit of time move on, and there's been names on plans and names on the building that we have approved, but it would just seem to me that the James Cummings Community Centre should be prominent as as the first name, although it doesn't appear on the building in that order, and library. If it was up to me, I'd be flipping it over. So first question, is it up for discussion influence, or is it too late?
Through your worship, it's never too late, councillor, but it's reasonably advanced. And yes, the report, I guess, hints at this is what we think it should be called, and we'd like you to say, yes, we agree. But if there is a different view, let's hear it. I thought, the purpose behind the report was, I think, my recollection was some councillors last term were getting a little uncomfortable where different people were calling the facility a slightly different name, and we thought some bad habits might take root and people were referring to it a different way. So again, I'll probably need to defer to Lorraine, I think, about how advanced and Neil Mayer, our facilities officer, about how advanced the signage is. It's certainly been approved that way, but that doesn't stop a new name arising, but it does seem to be colloquially, and the strong concern in the community was that the name of James Cummings should be preserved, and that was always attached to community room usage as distinct from a library.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm Lorraine Weston-Webb, the Libraries Manager. It was really a question from Council that they wanted a clarification. That's my memory of that meeting. Are we going to call it this or are we going to call it that? So it was just clarifying what was already being spoken and written. But there have been other ideas put forward, and if it turns out that Council would like that to be reviewed, it would be better to do it before we put the names up on the outside of the building.
According to the site manager, some of the signage is already underway at this stage. This report has been slightly delayed coming to council, so there may be extra cost if there is something different decided.
Thank you for that, staff members. Councillor McPhail.
Yes, just through your worship, in response to some of that commentary, it was around the query, as there was a number of comments that were going through media and obviously through council that it was the library, hence why we wanted, as part of the community, to recognise the iconic and heritage value of the fact that it had been previously the James Cumming Wing, and recognised for its entirety on where it actually originated from. I am of the ilk of what Councillor Highstead has indicated, that the library still isn't prominent in front of the James Cumming Community Centre, so maybe that could be a matter that's referred back to the community, but the amendment may need to be made in regard to a costing issue if we've already started down a track that maybe we can't stop the process.
Councillor Havel.
I'm wondering whether Councillor Highstead would actually like to move it as a motion.
I'd actually like to leave that for the rural councillors. I think this was from James Cumming, and I think it does strike that Mr Councillor McPhail would probably take that.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the motion that we review the fact of placing James Cumming name in the start of the signage. So the amendment would be that the James Cumming Community Centre and Library.
I would second that.
Okay, cool. So the motion was moved by Councillor Richard McPhail and seconded by Councillor Havel. Let's have some discussion on this new amendment. So I just wanted to ask the question of Sonia regarding that consultation with the community. How was that received? So obviously it was given out. Do you have a general understanding of how the community felt?
Through you, the worship, consultation with regards to.
So you said before that the images and things have been sent out to the public. Did you get an understanding of kind of how that was received by the public?
Oh, my apologies. No, we didn't get any feedback at all so one could assume it's positive. Just a point of clarification. The names, James Cumming Community Centre and Gore Library, there's separate entrances to each of those. The names will actually be split. There's not going to be one name running across it. I'm not sure if that helps clarify the order of what the names will appear in.
Thank you for that, Sonia. Chief, have you had a comment?
Yes, I wonder, Your Worship, if the meeting were slightly cross purposes, because the motion put forward by Councillor Highstead and Councillor McPhail suggests that the facility should be referred to as the James Cumming Community Centre and Library, and we have the two discrete entrances on the building. So would the motion be satisfied if we all knew it as the James Cumming Community Centre and Library when we refer to that complex, as opposed to having to put that very long name on two different entrances, which could cause a lot of confusion for the public? So in other words, could the motion be enacted without actually changing the signage?
Cool.
So
there was a yes. Do we have any further comment? I'll let you do write a reply, Keith.
Well, I'm sorry, Your Worship, it may be easier for the motion to be withdrawn then, given that explanation.
Just through Your Worship, in regard to withdrawing the motion, the fact is that we still would want the reference as James Cumming Community Centre and Library in regard to print or publication, so the motion will not be withdrawn, although we accept that the two separate entities are on separate ends of the building. So only fact is if you're driving north-south, depends on which side of the sign you're going to read first.
Councillor Dixon, did you have a comment there?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if we could have a complete new sign with some reference on it to the building itself, and how the name James Cumming was actually put on that building in the first place.
Are you suggesting like a plaque?
Like a plaque, similar to a plaque, but just something to explain Mr. James Cumming and the money that he donated to the community, and that it went to the James Cumming wing.
I would imagine, and to the Chief Executive's point, I'm assuming there's going to be a plaque for whoever ends up opening the building, so that could be included on that plaque. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship, there was a plaque in the old centre, and I see the facilities officer is running to my rescue with some detail that he can share with the meeting.
Yes, in the original James Cumming hall, there was a large photo. There was actually one photo framed of James Cumming himself, and then there was another large plaque that gave the information of the James Cumming himself and also his image. We've still got both those saved on site here, and I have been talking to Jim Geddes a while ago in regards to how we can basically portray that inside the James Cumming Community Centre so that the history still continues.
Thank you for that. Councillor Highstead, you had a comment?
I'm just wondering, as a alternative, could there be some signage at the library and maybe within the library just to recognise James Cumming? Because we've very much got the James Cumming Community Centre down there, the library up here. The library's going to have a huge amount of foot traffic, so perhaps to recognise James Cumming, the staff could consider the options around some either internal or external signage of certain prominence, just to reflect the wish of Councillor McPhail.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm on the same lines as Councillor Highstead on this one, and I'd like to make a recommendation that, knowing how much signage costs, and if it's quite well down the track, I don't think we should be removing ourselves from removing the names from the building, and I'm in agreement that it should be called the James Cumming Wing and Library. So perhaps we can have a sign outside in front of the car park which indicates that both this building belongs to the James Cumming Wing Community Centre, the James Cumming Community Centre and Library at the front. So everybody entering the frontage of the library and the frontage of the James Cumming wing of Community Centre can see that. And you're not altering anything in the building, more expense. And it can be in partially in with the new landscaping and car parking in the front.
That sounds like a perfectly fine recommendation. Do we have any further discussion? I'll have to refer to Susan on what those recommendations actually panned out there before we move that motion of an amendment. Do we have any further comment or any contrary arguments as to naming it the James Cumming Wing Community Centre and Library? Nothing? Nope.
No, nothing. I will second Councillor McPhail's recommendation that we call it the James Cumming Wing Community Centre and Library from now on, and that the signage be thought about in the front, as part of the new upgrade of car park and whatever is going to be out the front, plants, etc.
Yeah. Cool. So I believe that that Councillor Richard McPhail brought the amendment to the table, and that Councillor Hoval seconded it originally, and then that's added to the recommendation that we think about some tributary items inside the buildings and the location of it. Is everyone happy to move this motion? No objections? Everyone in favour, please say aye. And those against? The motion has been carried. Right, on to the big stuff. Not that was, not big at all. The Matoda River crossing and Longford Shed Bridge next steps. So just for clarification on this recommendation, as some people in the gallery and potentially even councillors haven't looked at the recommendation, there are two options that have been recommended regarding getting that water from one side of the river to the other. Those options are to continue to explore opportunities for a dual-purpose bridge. And the second is to solely focus on the required pipeline across the Matoda River. So hopefully that's pretty clear. One is a dedicated dual-purpose bridge, and the other is figuring out how to get that pipeline across the Matoda River, whether that is directly across the river at Maitland Street, installing a pipe across the existing State Harbour 1 bridge, or directly drilling the pipe below the Matoda River. I believe the council wants some direction in terms of what is best to explore. So I will open that, if I can get someone to move the motion, that this report be received, and that we provide some direction regarding the preferred next steps of the Matoda River crossing and Longford Shed Bridge project. Sorry, scratch that. That's the recommendation here. Do I have someone to move the motion that just the report be received? So, Councillor Phillips, and seconded by Councillor Dixon. Now it's open for discussion. Do we have anyone wanting to make some points here? Councillor Gardine.
Just a question through Your Honour to the Matt Bayliss. Is there room on the existing State Highway bridge for the two pipes? And that was the argument from the start, whether there was room on the existing bridge for two pipes or whether we need to put a new bridge up.
Through your worship, it's something that we'd need to look into further. It's not, yeah. And the existing service ducts, there's unlikely to be sufficient space, but potentially it could be attached somewhere else on the bridge. It's something that we certainly would, if we're to go down that option, would need to look into it further, and it could become cost prohibitive, but I guess it's an option that's on the table at the moment.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Councillor Hovell.
I'm reluctant to walk away from the option of cycling and walking across the river at this stage. I think that's something we should continue to have on the table. But I'm curious as to the criteria that Three Waters Department would be looking at using in terms of assessing the options that are before us. No doubt that would include the financial cost of the different options that have been identified, but I also believe that in having a report looking at the options, we also need a high-level assessment of the different options in a table that's looking at things like the cultural impact, and one of the options may have a low cultural impact or it may have a high cultural impact. The timing, I'd like to know how critical is the timing to actually look at this? Have we got time to go through a consenting process if we need to? What's the complexity with the different options of the consenting processes? One would think that if it's added to the State Highway Bridge, there'd be no consents, but all the others would require a consent, and what sort of cost might be involved? Something that consultants would be able to do, and the technical complexities. How complex are each of the options before us? So I think as a council, we need to have an overview report that actually compares the different options so that we can focus and give some direction as to which we believe should be followed through. But at this stage, I believe that the options should still include the pedestrian and cycling bridge across. Financial risk is also another matter that should be looked at in that report. If we're not going to get any funding from NZTA, what does that then expose the council to? So I guess I'm highlighting the need not only to focus on the economics, but also the environmental impacts, the visual impacts and everything else.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Just to clarify, your recommendation there was to include not to single them out into option 1 and option 2, but to get a table for both, all of the options available. So
and 4 options have been identified in the report. It may well be that there are other options that people can identify around the table and the staff can identify themselves, and I wouldn't want to rule out consideration of any option on what is potentially quite a controversial issue at this stage.
Just before I let other councillors speak, could I just get clarification from the Chief Executive on the timing of the matter at hand in terms of the urgency?
Either or. Yeah. Right, through your worship. Yeah, I just like to respond to that, I guess, and provide out my thoughts. And I guess as Councillor Hovell has alluded to, there's quite a bit of complexity there, particularly associated with the dual purpose bridge, and certainly if we go down that path, we will need to do quite a robust options assessment and present all the options and consider them all. I guess the purpose behind this report is to go through that options assessment. Will take quite a bit of work, and there'll be a reasonable amount of cost associated with that. If we are to solely focus on the pipeline across the river, then it removes a lot of that complexity. So I guess we're wanting to get some direction from the council before we go down that path of looking at the dual purpose option and spending a reasonable amount of money. We don't have a good understanding of what that amount would be at this stage, and that's something that we'd need to look into further. But wanting to just make sure that we're on the right path before we go down too far. I guess to the question around timing, certainly the dual purpose bridge or a bridge will take longer and need to go through that resource consenting process. If we were to go down the option of directionally drilling under the river or attaching a pipe to the state highway bridge, then the chances are we wouldn't need a resource consent, and that would significantly reduce our timing. And I guess I'll just mention there that the key driver behind this project is to make sure that all of Gore has drinking water that's compliant with the New Zealand drinking water standards, and until we get that pipeline across the bridge, the western side of, or sections of the western side of Gore won't have water that's compliant with drinking water standards.
Your Worship, if I can just clarify.
Yeah, sorry, could I just hold you there, Keith? Yeah, I think and Keith might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, but around the urgency of how long do we have to make this decision? Are these requirements about the water quality coming down on us quite hard? I don't know if who's the right person to answer that, but I've obviously realised that it's urgent regardless, but what kind of is that urgency?
Through your Worship, at this stage there's no specific date set as to when we need to have need to reach compliance with the drinking water standards. However, I suspect with the establishment of Te Mata Arawai, they will be looking at imposing specific dates. But at this stage there's no specific dates, but we obviously want to do it as soon as possible.
Thank you for that, Matt. Did that clarify for you? Sorry, I'll let other councillors speak, and then we'll circle back if you still have it. Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. The one key thing about this whole part here, we've got to get the community behind this. That was a massive issue that I've been talking to people about for ages. Got to get them to let people know what's going on and show the options and put it out there, because there's been considerable amount of money spent on this already, obviously, and I don't want to get shot in the street for for something like this. So I think we need to talk to the community and make sure they're well informed.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Hysted.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, as a former councillor, I was informed that the State Highway Bridge was ruled out, directional drilling was ruled out. So, and we'd been through this over a long number of years. So, where we're at now, I think before anything happens, we need a very high-level report with a rough order of costs and some basic visuals, and we need to get out and consult with the community. And there's two options: a bridge with a pipe or a bridge with dual access. And we need to get on with that and get out to the community, because Paul is quite right. The community need to have their say. That's where the last process failed in terms of consultation. And I see there's only two options, unless the world's changed since we last looked at this.
And I think that's, in line with Councillor Hovell's point there as well, and also Councillor McPhail's. Next up, Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I'm inclined to agree with that. I think we should have community consultation, particularly because of the path that we have been down, and the community are quite, they would like to be involved with this. There is one other option, and I think it may need Environment Southland's approval to do this, but it has been suggested that you could put a pipe into the riverbed rather than trying to drill underneath the riverbed. Do you have any comments on that, please, Matt?
Through your Worship, yes, I'm aware that that's been suggested quite a bit. I believe that getting the required consents for that could be extremely difficult, and in this day and age it's probably highly unlikely that we'd get the required approvals, but we can certainly investigate it. I'm sure the likes of Hokonui, Runanga and things like that would be very interested in any sort of application around that.
Can I also ask too that that we involve the iwi very early on in this consultation process as well.
Yeah, duly noted. Matt, on that one, has Environment Southland been consulted on this progress? Have there been discussions with them about kind of the goings on there?
Through your worship, yes, there's certainly been a number of discussions regarding this project with Environment Southland. Obviously, there was an initial consent required through Environment Southland for the initial proposal, and then we've had some preceding discussions since the Environment Court decision around potential options, and would continue to talk to Environment Southland around that.
Thank you for that, Matt. Councillor Reid, and then Councillor McDonough.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm actually in agreement with Councillor Highstead on this one. We're beating around the bush, we're reinventing the wheel again. We've got two options, and let's just investigate those two at this stage and engage with the community. I think they're the three priorities in my book.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald.
I've written on my piece of paper here, and I'm in total agreement with Councillor Highstead. Maitland Street, 2 estimates, pipe bridge only, bridge for walking and cycling, and consult with the community. You need something to actually say to them. These are the options. And I'm totally against going down to the other bridge. One, for the distance of pipe, the longer you make your pipes, the more trouble you can have. Secondly, if you attach the pipes, they're going to be attached under the bridge, presumably. And there's a hellish and flood risk when it comes through there. There'll be massive trees come down that river. I know, working for the paper mill at 20 years, they ended up outside my office there. So how are you going to protect the pipes under the bridge if a massive flood comes down? So that's my concerns on that bridge. So I'm fully in support of Councillor Highstead's direction there. Thank you.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I've sat and listened to everybody, and I'm absolutely getting just a little bit annoyed about how long this is taking. We initially wanted a bridge to take pipes across the Mataura River. Then came up the idea about having a shared bridge. So herein lies why we're still 4 years down the track and nothing's happened and cost us a lot of money. The staff are asking us for direction. Make a decision today so they can get on with it, so we can get the water over the river. We went down the track about going under the river. Unknown cost. Ask our friends at MVM. A bridge was a known cost. A cost comes to council. We know what the cost is. We can relay that to the ratepayer. The bridge can be put in for 50 to 100 years. We can build the bridge so if East Gore expands, we can put pump stations across there, giving us an alternative pump station from East Gore. Currently, we only have one. And those are the kinds of things that we've got to think about. The best option is, let's get the staff on the track to get it done. And Councillor Heisey is right. Let's get it done, get a report from, and I like to move that we have one bridge carrying pipes across from Maitland Street, carrying to and from, and build the bridge so it's in an can have existing pipes for the future. So whether that be stormwater, sewer, or whatever it might be, to come bring them back to our oxidation ponds and later on to our BMR plant. And those are the kind of things that we've got to think about. Because currently, if we wanted to separate East Gore from stormwater, where are we going to take it? Do we have to go down the line again, once again, and saying, do we have to go under the river again? No. So let's build it once, let's build it for the future, and it may cost a little bit more, but at least we can say that we've done it once and done it right. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just thinking there. There's a number around the table. I mean, I guess we'll get a second if there's a seconder for Phillips, Nichols, got a seconder there. So the move of the motion, did we want to clarify what the motion was? Yeah. And I think there should be discussion. There's a number of recommendations that have been passed around.
And my recommendation was that I agreed with what Councillor Highstead had said, that we need to have a report from the staff with their recommendation, and my recommendation is that we go with one single bridge across the Mataura River at Maitland Street.
Just
dual options.
Yes, dual options. Your Worship, so with dual options, so with potential for walking and cycling facility as well.
Two options. I'll give you that one. Thank you.
I'm just going to get the comment stuff on this. I don't know, we've kind of jumped ahead of the recommendation that's in the report, so we'll move it to staff for this one.
Just one point of clarification really is that for council to be really across is that regardless of what type of bridge we build at that location, doesn't mean that it's going to be guaranteed to be approved. Whether it's a pipe bridge or a dual purpose bridge, that can still be challenged in terms of its environmental effects. And so you need to weigh that up versus, and this is sort of what I guess the report was trying to get at, is versus the directional drilling, which has some unknown costs, but has the benefit of not having to go through that, likely not having to go through that consent process. So just in terms of that final direction, I think that's really important, because we don't want to come back 3-4 months down the track after going through consultation, and then you weren't really clear that it can still be approved or declined through that consenting process.
So, did you want to respond to that, or?
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand what the pros and cons are, but the thing about it is that we've got to start, we've got to get it going, and I understand if we do it right this time, we should have some success. So let's make sure that we do it right. Consultation, consultation, consultation.
Councillor Hovell.
I followed very closely the previous consent that went through, and on the basis of that, I would not like to see us put all of our eggs in one basket as to a potential site for putting the structure across the river, because there are other examples that are available in terms of a crossing point, be it at Nelson Street or elsewhere. And until we have a high-level report that actually compares the different options, it would be unwise for us to say that is the one we want to go out and consult on. I want to know a rough order of cost, and if you look at the cost of the bridge that went through the consenting process, and look at a high-order assessment of other options, even if it's in qualifiable terms, high, medium, low, or the risk, etc. What's the information that we don't have? What are we exposing ourselves to in risk? So that's why I'm adamant that we still need to be looking at maybe 4 or 5 options, coming back to council, then at that stage picking 2 to compare and go out to public consultation before proceeding further. I take the comments from Mr. Bayliss in terms of how urgent it is, how soon we have to get on to this, is we have time and we should be doing it in a structured sort of way.
So just to get some order back into the conversation, so Councillor Phillips has moved the motion that we focus solely on option 1 and get some determinations around what that would actually look like, so that we have direction. Do we have a seconder for that motion? No seconder for that. So
I would if the location wasn't specific. If it was, we have the flexibility in a dual purpose crossing or just a pipe crossing, just based on consenting vagaries.
So my understanding of the motion was to take the recommendation of looking into option 1 and getting some further clarification information on that. Is that correct, Councillor Phillips?
Correct, but the recommendation is the Maitland Street recommendation at the top. And after going through the whole process earlier on right from the start of this proceeding, I believe that we have a better chance if we specifically say that's where we're going to be. Stop murmuring around the different options and think about what's the best thing for the future, what's the best thing for now. If it's a shared bridge at Maitland Street, okay, then we'll come up with the thing. But if it's not the right place, everybody around this table, once we get the report, will have that decision to be made. And if it is the right place, then let's get ahead and get it done.
So once again, sorry, Councillor, I'm just gonna to clarify on that amendment to the motion, or you're pushing for the motion that option 1 will be explored, and all options regarding that bridge, whether it's location, costs, community impact, will be provided to council. Is that correct? So you're moving that motion, and do we have a seconder in Councillor Highstead, or are you still thinking on that one?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. It refers, option 1 is a dual purpose bridge, and we've discussed that it could be either single, pipe only, or dual purpose in that one location. So we need the community to tell us, in my view, do they want pipe only or dual purpose, and what the cost ramifications at a high level are, and some imagery, so we can consult. That's what I had in mind.
So I think there are two separate motions here then, regarding it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Highstead and Councillor Hovel's motion seem very similar in terms of providing a more generalised overview of the options at hand, and then having that open to the community as well, so that they can see those options, and then when those options are provided, then we might be able to make a better decision on that. Is that correct, or would we like to form? I just would like to get a motion on the table and it's seconded, so that we can have a discussion around whatever that motion is.
Could we refer the Chief Executive to try and guide us to come up with something that the staff can work with? I think everyone on the table's got a similar intent. We want, Councillor Phillips is right, we want to get on with it, but we don't want to tie the staff's hands or these council's hands to something that isn't successful.
Yeah, if you could comment at that.
Through your worship, I think what the meeting wants is a analysis of a dual purpose bridge that can potentially carry just water and wastewater pipes, or walking and cycling on a select few locations from the extremes of Maitland Street and 2 or 3 other locales heading towards the existing Main Street Bridge, with high-level costings and imagery associated with it, in order that you can either say, there's 3 or 4 options we can share with the community, or get down to perhaps a couple or even one, and proceed on that basis. Knowing, of course, that there is still the direct drilling under the river as a point of last resort, should those costings prove to be very challenging, because I'm acutely aware that since we last assessed the cost of the former design, the construction market has moved appreciably, and the pockets of Wakakatahi or NZTA have shortened appreciably. So those things will all go into the mix. Is that a fair summation of what you'd like to see come before the council? Okay.
Yeah, I think the urgency here is paramount. 1, to do with costings, and 2, but for the impending regulation that we're going to have to stick to. Do we have any further comment? I'm just trying to formulate what this motion actually looks like. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. Just to be able to make a decision, I believe if we go to Maitland Street, there will be no Wakakahati funding at all. So that means that it'll be up to council to pay the full cost, which then leads me back to going out to the community. We need to know if they're prepared to front that cost.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Executive, I'd imagine that Wakutahi probably isn't going to get involved in really any project, given their current funding status?
Well, we do know that the budget for walking and cycling projects, and this is which the bridge would be funded out of, has been reduced. I've already been told a few months back that their funding situation is challenging, and ironically, Wakatahi still have a marked preference for the site that was the subject of the big decline decision from the Environment Court. But those things are better off coming from the staff with your direction, and perhaps with updated estimates, it may become quite crystal clear what the real feasible options are and what the also-rans are. So hence my suggestion of maybe the staff coming up with 3 or 4 practical options for a dual-purpose bridge at certain locations, including Maitland Street, and then they can perform the basis of a more informed discussion with a view to going out to the people with your more refined choice of locations.
Councillor Gardine?
Yes, I was involved in the Permanent Bridge. It took us 7 years from go to woe, and it actually got blown out before it got, and we increased our subsidy. But just a real lesson from the Permanent Bridge was when we actually put the tenders out for the design that it cost us 300,000 to 400,000, we had alternative tenders that were put in by the industry, and we actually accepted one of them at $2 million less than the estimates. So we could have saved ourselves an awful lot of money, about 900,000, if we just put a tender out for design and build a bridge. And it actually would have sped the whole operation up. And you could get an innovative designer, bridge builder. They have set plans and they have their own engineers, and of course would have to get it peer reviewed. That would speed the whole process. You'd have to decide on a site, or you'd let them decide.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPhail?
Thank you, Worship. I think one of the key things is the design was an issue around the community. Location was one thing, but the design was a key factor and I think coming up with some options of designs and going to the community and saying, what do you think, what do you like the look of that? Because that would be a great thing to do if we could, as part of the whole process.
Councillor McDonald?
Just one last comment. The further you go down the river, the more pipe you've got to put in, the more cost there is. So the further you keep up to Maitland Street, there's very little piping, you're straight across, so there's savings to be made. So the bridge at Maitland Street, as far as piping would go, would be far the cheapest option.
Councillor McDonnell, and then Councillor McKenzie. Sorry, Councillor Gardine, I was looking right at you.
Just 2 points on that one is, Stuart, is the shortest route is the best route, but if you actually visit the site, the banks are not as stable at Maitland Street as you may, for a bridge builder, he may want to go down a wee bit to get rock, and you need to leave that a wee bit flexible, because there will be a trade-off between foundations and length and against pipe length. So you need to have some flexibility in the system.
Is there Councillor McKenzie?
Your Worship, just clarifying with Matt, there is no resource consents necessary to go under the river? Is that what you said before? Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that point.
Through your Worship, that's my understanding. Yeah, we'd have to double check that, but my understanding is that when pipelines were installed for the Matara Valley Milk Development, there weren't resource consents required.
Worship, I can correct that. The Council's district plan has a provision in it saying that if earthworks taken, I think it's more than 3 months, then you need a resource consent to disturb ground, including ground under the river. And in the case of Matara Valley Milk, they had 2 extensions to their resource consent from the Gore District Council. They did not need a consent from Environment Southland.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matt. Right, we got a motion brewing here. I think the general consensus around the table is to go with a bridge, and to focus our research efforts on a bridge, so that we can at least give direction to the staff about areas to explore. Am I getting that general consensus around the place? Did anyone want to move a motion around something broader around the bridge than what the motion that Councillor Phillips had brought up, or have we got a bit more support for that motion now? Anyone want to? Oh, Matt, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I was just keen to, I guess, ask a question, and I guess as I alluded to earlier, there's going to be a reasonable amount of money required to investigate options and things like that, to, I think, come to bring the information that you need and get the high level costs and things like that. Do you want us to go out and consult with the community and ask them whether they want us to continue down the path of a dual purpose bridge, or just focus on the pipeline first before we do that investigation work? Or do you want us to do the investigation work, spend some money, and then consult with the community?
I'll let Councillor Havel speak if he would like. Oh, Councillor Reid, sorry.
Thank you. I think we need to give the community the options as to what they want, and they need to be able to see what they want, or the options that they're going to choose from. There's no point in us telling them that they're going to have a bridge that looks like A, B, C, D, because we've been down that road, or bridge, pardon pun. But yeah, no, I'd really like to see us give them some options, Matt, please.
Councillor Havel. Several of us have talked about a high-level assessment. I don't see a need to get into incurring considerable cost by the council to actually look at what the cost of the different options are. We've had costing done for a bridge in a certain location. What we need to know is that at that rough order of costs at the other sites that we're looking at, are we looking at more complex issues or similar? So at the high level, I'm not expecting to see a detailed breakdown of design or the rest of it, because one of the issues that's raised is that the design is probably one of the critical issues that the public would want to comment on. So in terms of, in some respects, it would be better not to see any numbers in the report that comes back to council, other than the complexity that you're going to have at this site is more than at site A or B. I would rather see it in that format as the initial shakedown, and prior to going out to consultation with the council, we reduce the number of options and provide some more information. But we've got to keep the design flexible. In part, the opposition to the previous one was the design, as well as the visual impact of the location.
Did you want to put a motion to that effect if there's no other comment?
All right, I'd move that the staff be directed to report back to the council in terms of options that may be available for a bridge that provides for the three alternatives that we've been talking about at various locations in the river, so that we can provide further direction for more detailed assessment, and that be a high-level assessment looking at the different effects.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Reid. Is there any further discussion to that amendment? No? Wow. Do we... Okay, cool. Let's put that to a vote then. All those in favour, please say aye. And then against? The motion is carried. Thank you for that, Councillor. So the next on the agenda is the Gore District Council Recycling Update, Rethinking Waste. And there are quite a few recommendations in there, but first off, do we have a motion that that report be received? Councillor Richard McPhail, the seconder. Councillor Phillips. Open to discussion when people are ready. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I note in this report, we're talking about glass, and we're still talking about crushing glass. I believe there's a market for clear glass. If you can separate coloured glass from clear glass, there's quite a good market for that. So I'm wondering if we could perhaps have a report on how easily it would be to separate the glass, so we can sell off the clear glass from the coloured glass, which would then, there wouldn't be such huge amounts of crushed glass at a transfer station. And I also note that food is our largest waste, and so and it releases methane. And I see the government is taking a stance to change this and to that we have to collect food waste, but I think it should come with funding from central government as well, because there's quite a huge cost for us to recycle, and that cost's falling back on our ratepayers. So I believe that we should be pushing central government for some funding if they want food taken out of our waste stream.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I would tend to agree. I think this report indicates in it that there was some work done by the Otago Mayoral Forum around this in particular issue. I don't believe the report contains, and correct me if I'm wrong, what discussions were actually had there, but I think further investigation in terms of what has been decided, once again not reinventing the wheel, but we might be able to get some comment on that.
Through you, Your Worship. Thanks for that question, Glenys. The recommendation from Nikki Bold, the consultant, really is around trying to utilise glass locally. So I'd be interested just sort of what options there are locally to recycle even the separated glass. From the discussions to date, what we are trying to do to complete the circular economy in terms of recycling glass is to crush it through a process that we're investigating through McGregor's Concrete, and looking at how that can then be utilised across different materials, such as a bedding material, whether it's distributed through an AP20, or looking at other options to crush it down and use it as drainage bedding, or in drains itself, to around different low risk council options. So the key thing around the glass is trying to avoid having to transport it, because the transport of glass is extremely costly in its full form. And I guess the other point is just to ensure that we're also note that the separation of glass comes with a cost too. So having to separate coloured from clear glass certainly is a process that has a cost associated to it. So we're trying to balance it out, but as the report outlines, there's some ongoing work around the best use for glass, but we're certainly trying to do that and trying to do it locally if we can within the region.
Councillor Hosted.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wonder if also other options could be explored rather than just resuming a full-scale curbside recycling. For example, glass. If you travel to cities, go to student areas, there's glass igloos, for the students to deposit their glass. There could be options for those to be scattered throughout the community. So if the staff could also take that into account. I see also that we have a member of the Pakeke Lions present, and that just reminds me that we do have a community that's actively involved in this space, and it would be great that they were engaged with as part of this process, because they are Gore's Recycling at this present time, and I think we should recognise that and learn from their wisdom.
Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yeah, obviously, through your worship and through to Jason, in regard to the minimisation officer and the levies that we've been getting charged, I've asked this previous times whether we actually look at, with that role that's been adopted into the plan, whether we can actually get some funding through central government in regard to those levies, because I think there is funding paths in there.
Through you, Your Worship, there's certainly there are a number of funding avenues, and that sort of touches on the other point that Glenys raised around organics. We certainly will be looking at every option around that, and that is really the outcome that we're seeking today, is to be able to go away, investigate those, and bring a full suite of options back to council that can maybe offset costs, use existing levy funding, or look at ways to minimise the cost to the ratepayer through a number of different options. So certainly leaving everything on the table there at this point.
Thank you. And just further comment there, Your Worship. Just in regard to that willingness to resume, having been part of the workshops and not actually being a resident of town, I am aware of the huge number of people within the community that want some sort of recycling, curbside recycling to happen. And it's a continual, at the workshops was a continual bugbear that came up. So that's probably why I have full support to that resuming of the service, or any negotiations that we can impart that may improve us. Also adding to that, in regard to the levy situation, that we should be actively encouraging our recyclers, and I think my fellow councillor Highstead's referred to the cardboard recycling done by Pakeke, that we should be actively supporting them. I know we do grants, but at the current world situation, the cost of cardboard being recycled is very, very low on their return, and also the fact that that if we put that cardboard that they recycle over our transfer face, we pay by the tonne, and I think it's a vicinity of about 650 tonne they put through a year, and we pay the levy. If that was to go over to the transfer site, we'd be paying for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Havell.
I fully support the staff doing a further report to us in terms of costing options right through to the full recycling in the urban area. Over the last 6 months and over the election period, there were several key issues that came out constantly, and recycling was near the top of that list. In addition, the Youth Council has been promoting, and the youth more widely, the Youth Council has been promoting adoption of recycling being looked at again, and for those reasons I fully support what is included in the recommendations.
Councillor Reid, you have a comment?
Thank you, I do. One thing I would like to note with the Pakekes, that they also recycle aluminium, which I think at the moment is actually quite lucrative. But whether members of the public know that, perhaps our communications person who's not in the room might be able to chase that up again on behalf of Pakeke. And the other thing is, I think I'm quite happy to move the recommendation, and definitely giving consideration to the dedicated waste minimisation officer, because I think that's the only way going forward, that somebody's dedicated in that space should be actually pushing these things and driving it. But I would also like to thank Jason for the report. It's a good one, and as I said, I'm happy to support that recommendation.
Before we move that, the further motions on here, is there any further comments? No. There is a bit of further comment from me. So, Jason, I just want some clarification. I've got a couple of points, actually. The first one being, have we looked into putting out an expression of interest for actually contracting out the entire service. So not handling it by council, but making the ratepayer charging the ratepayer separately, and then we take that off their rates. Has there been any consideration into an option like that?
How would you do that?
Yeah, yes, through your worship. The old system that we did have is a contracted system. So if there was going to be a reinstatement of the service or a modification of that service, it would still be a contracted service. There is no in-house service delivery when it comes to refuse collection or disposal.
Sorry, to clarify, so the recommendation is there to get to work with ICC again, which in talking to Mayor Nobby Clark, they're more than happy for us to get back involved with. I was expressing an interest of completely separate of that, so whether there is a contractor who would actually take on that role, so they get paid separately to the council. We don't pay for it. Ratepayers pay for it person by person basis. And whether consideration has been taken to that. I know that KCDC and WIMAC have that service, and there's a number of councils around the country that have changed that model. I just wonder if there's been any consideration into that model.
Yes, through your worship, I think there's certainly some pros and cons to having a fully contracted service such as that undertaken by companies such as Waste Management and others around the country. However, it may be able to be done at a slightly cheaper price, but the con is really what it takes out of your communities. So we need to be aware of the economic implication of a system like that. And again, for Southland, it's obviously a little bit harder just given our location to centres. So certainly through WasteNet and through our relationships with bond contracts and Recycle South, there's opportunities there, but those, I guess that's part of the consideration about trying to do things slightly differently here in the south and get the best outcome for our community.
Thank you for that, Jason. What I am quite keen to do is to break this down into three separate motions, this recommendation, because they're all quite different. So the first recommendation is that the council note the willingness of Invercity City Council, Recycle South and Bond Contracts Ltd to support and reintroduce curbside recycling collection service for Gore and Matoda. Do I have a motion? Does anyone want to bring that motion forward? The recommendation forward, that motion. Councillor Hovell, and a seconder. Councillor McPhail. Do we have discussion on that in particular motion about going and talking to Invercargill City Council again and understanding the ins and outs of working with them and their recycling?
As the mover, if I can speak to that, what the motion is saying is we are noting the willingness. I would suggest that we don't really need to debate it. It's merely an observation, and I think you can put the motion.
So I was more seeing if there was any interest to broaden that out into conversations, but we can keep it at a willingness. That's fine. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering about the cost, because I know that last time we debated this and the cost was quite high to go back through Recycle South. So has that changed? Is it still the same cost? And yeah, so that was something that I think we need to know before we approve or are willing.
So, and I'll let the staff answer this as well, but I believe the motion's just for the willingness rather than the kind of ins and outs. So I think we will find out more of that in due course. But if staff still wanted to speak to that, more than happy to.
through your worship, yes, that's correct. So we're not, we're certainly not saying that there aren't going to be costs involved with carrying out the service, but what we want to do is make sure that there is a willingness for us to go and obtain those and provide a suite of options to council and then to the community for consideration.
Brilliant. So any further discussion around that? Cool. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Into the next one that's there, that there is a willingness to resume a curbside recycling collection service, that the scope and assessed cost of any such service be identified, and then the subject of community re-engagement with a view to resume a full-scale curbside recycling service from that 1st of July 2023. Do we have anyone to move that motion? Councillor Dixon, and seconder Councillor Richard McPhail, and I open it to the floor to discussion on that one. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Worship. I just asked the question about the date, 1st of July 2023. Are the staff quite comfortable with that time frame?
Certainly at this point that's the aim, and we will report back to council if there is a concern about meeting that time frame, but we're mindful of the fact that there is community and council appetite to get this back up and running, and so we're trying to push for that date, and we'll certainly keep you informed if there's any movement on that throughout the process.
Just to touch on that, is there any possibility of getting it done sooner? Within reason, of course.
Probably not. I think we would want to make sure that we consider all those costs appropriately, and then as part of our recognising in terms of our annual plan for the following year. So just making sure that we align, which is why that time frame has sort of been selected.
Thank you for that, Jason. Councillor Hosted.
I guess my concern with the second recommendation, it doesn't pause on the cost issue. It goes straight to assessing the cost and scope and taking that to the community. It doesn't allow the council to put it through any financial model, annual plan, or debate around this table. So I would be voting against that in its current form, unless the mover is willing to change it. I believe it's just as important to go through an annual planning process as the waste minimisation officer. It's a larger cost, it's significant. I know there's a real willingness to get on with it and get this done, but it has to go through process, being the annual plan. That's the only process, immediate process we have.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. The Councillor Heisey raises a good point. The annual plan is not mandatory to consult if you're not making a decent departure from your long-term plan. This would be a departure because we've placed the service on life support, as I refer to it. But the fact that you're doing community engagement, and if you're getting a clear feedback from the community, it would all depend on whether you would opt to consult on your annual plan or believe you've got enough direction from the community to box on and just adopt the annual plan and introduce the service. So I can see both sides of the argument, but the resolution is that you will go to the community and seek their views with costs attached. And I would suggest that, depending on what those costs are, the answer might be reasonably compelling. If it's a steep increase in cost from what was the price of 2020, the community may not be so enthusiastic to embrace a full-blown curbside recycling system. So I personally think there's sufficient checks and balances in the system, because this is going to come back to you, the council, with the costs, and all you're committing to do here is to go to the community with sufficient information to give you a clear direction as to whether you should reintroduce the service in full, in part, or not at all.
Councillor Huston.
Experience tells me to disagree with the Chief Executive. This is if staff are given a mandate from this meeting under this recommendation, there is not a pause on the financial implication. It says that we're going to resume recycling on 1 July 23 after engaging with the community. So I would like a slight amendment just to ensure that it does come back to this table. We have been here before and respect the staff, yes. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little bit different, but we do just need to be tight. So rather than move an amendment, I just wonder if there's a suggestion that the mover and seconder would agree with.
If you could run that amendment anyway, Councillor Highstead, thanks. Just so it's really, really clear, because it's quite detail orientated in there.
If I may, Your Worship. So it would read that if there's a willingness to resume a curbside recycling service, the scope and assessed cost of any service be identified and subject to approval by council, then be the subject of community engagement.
So I have that moved by Councillor Hovell and seconded by Highstead. Oh, did you want to second that one, or? Yep, cool. So that amendment stands, and we'll have discussion on that amendment as well. Councillor McDonnell? Just in support?
I'm in favour. I'm in favour.
Brilliant. Any further discussion? Perfect. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Motion is carried. So then the motion, sorry. Yep.
Amendment to the vote, yes.
Yeah, so we'll move that motion. I'm assuming the same mover? Yes, and the same seconder? Yep. And all those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Perfect. And those against? Fantastic. And the last one here is that the council give consideration to employing a dedicated waste minimalisation officer through the 23-24 annual plan process. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Highstead, and open for discussion. Councillor McDonnell.
Is this going to be a full-time FTE or a part-time job? What is the order of cost? Could I direct that to?
Just to clarify, I think, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the recommendation is that we'll take consideration, so it'll be discussed further in the annual plan process. But did you have rough estimates that you want to comment on, or not really?
Through your worship, not at this stage. There's certainly a movement across the country now with the changes in legislation to have minimisation officers across council to manage that, and certainly we will be able to look at what other councils are doing and seek costs, some approximate costs to put in front of council as part of the annual plan process.
Yeah, my only concern with this recommendation is a lot around the job description and the role and the purpose of this waste minimalisation officer. But I understand that after consideration is given around the annual plan process, we will have a deeper understanding before making a final decision on that. So if everyone, is there any other comments on that waste minimalisation officer? Councillor Stringer?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Does this person come with any powers or responsibilities with that position of waste minimisation? Like, do they have the ability to act upon fly tipping?
I think that's yet to be determined, but maybe some general advice, or based on maybe what other councils are doing that you may have seen.
Yes, through your worship. No, the waste minimisation officer is more around education, communication, promotion of best practice. Issues around fly tipping is really the regulatory arm of the council's response, which Mrs. Frances Shepherd takes care of. So, yeah, this is more about actually getting out there within the community and promoting good practice and encouraging people to minimise their waste.
So with that, obviously Councillor McDonald has just stepped out of the room, but can we get a, I'd like to, see support for the motion, so those in support of the motion please say aye. And the motion is carried. Might just take a quick interim if that's okay with everyone, just while Councillor McDonald has a toilet break, I'm guessing. Is that all right with everyone? Just yeah. We'll resume in, say, 2 minutes. Thank you. If we could slowly bring attention back to the council, now that all councillors have relieved themselves.
Not all.
Well, not all of them. Brilliant. We'll have quiet in the chambers. So there's going to be a quick change of order here with these next points. So I'm going to defer point 8, which is Executive Assistant to His Worship the Mayor, and address point 9 first. So point 9 is mayoral expense claim for the trip to Wellington and attend the New Year's meeting. I'd like to inform councillors. Oh, we've got a wanderer. Oh, I see. I'd like to inform the councillors and the general public that all costs related to my personal assistant, I've accepted the cost, as she was my personal assistant, and I don't think that it should be taken on by the council, following the recommendation by staff and also conversations with councillors. I will follow current procedures to those claims for myself, and therefore this part of the agenda will be withdrawn, and there will be no further discussion on this matter. Going back to point number 8, which is the Executive Assistant for His Worship the Mayor. So I think some explanation by me is needed here as to why this is on the agenda. As many people will know, I've had my own personal assistant helping me out in the interim. I was, heavily affected by media and things being thrown at me, and I didn't think that was fair on the joint assistant of both myself and the Chief Executive. It also pulls that resource away from the Chief Executive. And I just wanted to get a general feeling for what Council's thought was around this issue, hence why it has been brought forward. it is a matter of support for myself and therefore so that I can help councillors out on that issue. The whole recommendation is entirely a matter of political discretion for the council, so it's a discussion that we need to have around the recommendation. My initial thought around hours, salary, job description, that sort of thing, I think will need to be sorted out by the chief executive further to whether this position is open or not. I won't hold the floor for much longer. I know that there are some people who want to speak on this this issue. So, do I have a mover for the? Well, I guess we don't need a mover for the motion, do we? We'll have to come up with one. But I'll open the floor to discussion. Are there people in favour of the movement first?
Your Worship, I think procedurally we should have a discussion, and from that a motion be developed, either positive or negative.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have that open discussion. Did you want to lead the proceedings, or anyone else? Councillor Highstead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I guess my comments won't surprise you. So let's do this in good heart. Look, I'll straight away move that the position of a dedicated EA for the mayor be declined. No other mayor in Southland region has a dedicated EA. I'm concerned about the cost of $85,000 being inflicted on the community. We're a small council. The council already employs an EA, 50% dedicated to you. I'm deeply concerned at the potential employment ramifications. It's referred to in the Chief Executive's report. It's referred to as management of change process in that report. The community would really be better served by investing a resource into more urgent areas, finance, policy, roading. Ben, Mr. Mayor, you campaigned on back to basics and eliminating vanity projects, and I was part of the council that undertook some of the vanity projects. So I'd have to say this role could be viewed as your own personal vanity project. So hence that's my my motion, and I ask for a seconder.
To second that motion.
So the motion that's that this recommendation is, well, the recommendation of having an executive assistant declined. So moved by Councillor Highstead and seconded by Councillor Reid. Did you want to speak to the seconder, or you want to reserve that for later on? Yeah, it's open to discussion on that motion.
Yeah, I'm in my view, we're too small for this. We also have already an EA, as Councillor Highstead said, and I think really she could be a flight risk if she feels that her job is not being taken seriously. And as also Councillor Highstead said, you campaigned on back to basics. That was one of your main projects, and this is absolutely not back to basics. So in no way can I support it.
Councillor McPhail. Richard McPhail.
Just checking which one you're referring to, Your Worship. They're everywhere. Yeah, we have two guns drawn. Yeah, I'm probably, as the other councillors have stated, probably some of the commentary you've given there, Your Worship, in regard to media, and obviously you have been elevated to a high profile very suddenly, and there was a huge uptake in regard to media, and no doubt media interest around what we're discussing here. But it should be emphasised that the council has a media section. They have media managers, we have communication managers. If that was going to be part of the factors that you're pushing forward around the EA, when you actually have we have a 50% PA there, I don't think there's any grounds for it to be supported there. And I do agree with my fellow councillors, it is a luxury item. Our other brothers and sisters councils around the countryside that surround us don't have that opportunity, so I won't be supporting that, and support the motion by my fellow councillor Highstead.
Any further comment? Anyone else? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. My main concern is is the section that you got 4.1 in your justification, and in the last comment it says the dedicated personal assistant not to share this resource with the chief executive or others. I have a grave concern about that, because we hopefully are transparent in all our actions within council, whether it be staff or the government's group, and this is why I'll be voting no, basically because of that comment, and it really fooled me that it was in there.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor McKenzie, you had your hand up before. Sorry, Councillor Dixon. Councillor McKenzie.
Your Worship, thank you. I want to make a bit of a statement here. I'm going to have a wee bit of a rave on, or whatever you want to call it. I believe because of your age, and there's a lot of us here are newbies, you may have needed a bit of extra assistance at the start. I know it is available, and just things didn't quite go the right way, but I know that you have been personally under a hell of a lot of pressure from media, etc. And I do back you, but possibly there isn't a need for a full-time person to help you out, but I do believe...
The recommendation was part-time, but yes.
Yeah, I think there possibly was a bit of need for extra support and possibly better communication all around the place. But that's my comment. Thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. My concerns about this is actually the cost, because it's not just the wage, it's also there's superannuation, there's training, there's travel, and other costs here. And in this climate, when everyone's feeling things are quite tight, it's actually another 0.4% on our rates. So I know that you probably do have a lot of extra work to do, and I agree with Councillor Caveman that yes, you have had some extra pressure put on you, but I just don't think that council can absorb the costs at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comment? No? Perfect. We shall have a vote then. Can I get a raise of hands of who would like that motion to carry? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, the motion carries. No, it was only a conflict for 0.9. It's fine. Either way, the motion is carried, and so that has been declined.
If I may, there is a corollary that then follows from that, and I would hope that once the committee structure is confirmed, the Chief Executive report to the Council outlining options for providing administrative and governance support to elected members.
Would you like that to raise it as a motion into the willingness to investigate a further date around governance support pursuant to those committees being formed, or is it just a side note for now?
I'll be guided by the Chief Executive, but I think it only needs to be a side note that in terms of once we've got our structure in place, I think it falls to him to then advise us how our needs are going to be met.
Thank you for that, Councillor. We will move on to the next agenda item. So the adoption of pecuniary interest register and the appointment of the registrar. So can I please have a mover for the recommendation that the report be received and noted? Councillor Gardine and Councillor Dixon second. And now it's open for discussion. The only discussion topic I'd have there is around just wanted to make a note more than a motion around the spreadsheet that was provided to councillors. Under a general understanding across councillors, and I've also talked to the Chief Executive that needs a bit of work, and I understand that there's been some work done there with ICC in that regard. So while that report is noted, it's also following, there'll be an updated spreadsheet for councillors regarding the matter. Cool, so to move the motion, all those in favour, please say aye. And against, and the motion is carried. The second one there was that the council approve a general manager corporate support to be the registrar of the pecuniary interest register. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor McDonald, and seconder Councillor Reid. Open for discussion. So my only comment on that is just given the nature of there's still quite a bit of work here to be done. Whether we want to appoint the register right here and now, or whether we want to push it once we have a bit more of an understanding of the register, and it's ironed out a bit more. I don't know what the general consensus is around the table. Councillor Havel?
I would have thought that we need to appoint someone who actually is doing the work to report back to us on what's in the register, and we need a registrar to do that. So I see it as a motion of process, not one of principle.
Yep, cool, fantastic. Let's move that motion then. Oh, yeah, I think it's been moved, sorry, isn't it? Did I get movers for that? Yeah, I did. Thank you. So, all those in favour, please say aye. And against? And the motion is moved. Matai Ridge street names. We're into the easier stuff now. Yay. So if I get a mover for that the council endorse the street names of, you have to excuse my pronunciation here, Kahakatia Drive and Kowhai Place within Matai Ridge residential subdivision. Councillor Reid is the mover and Councillor McPhail as the seconder. Is there any discussion on these topics? Councillor Reid?
I think it's quite appropriate, given that Matai Ridge is black pine and Kahakatia is white pine, so I'm happy with both those place names.
Yeah, I'd have to agree and talk to the Chief Executive. I think the consultation with local iwi was very good on that process, and I think the names are appropriate. Is there any other discussion around the table? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Agenda item number 12, committee structure and governance arrangements for 2022 to 2025. Given that we tabled the report in the inaugural meeting, we will table this report also, bearing further conversation, and so no further conversation will be had there. As for business to be considered pursuant to Local Government Act, Information Act 1987, this is also being pushed to the next meeting as a number of us campaigned on transparency and not moving into in committee. I think it would be inappropriate to do this at the very first meeting that we have. I've talked with the Chief Executive and none of these matters are urgent. In regards to the conversation of minutes, I would be quite keen to have the auditor look into those minutes just to make sure that process was duly followed there. So that just needs a bit of time, so that will be moved to the council meeting and there'll be no further discussion on that one. That's the end of the meeting. We've got through all the agenda points. I think we all got unscathed. So if there's nothing else, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone.